So you're playing Vermintide and you want to make the jump to Cataclysm. I think I can help you out with that. My name's Indypride, and I'm by no means the best or most experienced player on Vermintide, but I have completed every map in the game multiple times on every difficulty, and I certainly have enough game knowledge and experience to make a video that will be beneficial to those of you who are looking to improve. And if you just want to see me slay rats, that's fine too. This video will be perfect for you as well. I'll be running some Castle Drachenfels on Cataclysm difficulty with Bardin the Dwarf Ranger. This is hands down one of my favorite maps in the game, and as we get into the gameplay and move along, I think you'll see why. It's just a beautifully designed, beautifully crafted, gloomy, and terrifying map. But I wanted to share some tips for newer players or those who are looking to make the jump to the highest difficulty in the game. But these tips should be helpful for lower difficulties as well. I'm running with an exotic quality Great Axe with Bloodlust, Perfect Balance, and Backstabbery. Bloodlust gives me a 10% chance to regain 10 health every time I kill an enemy. Perfect Balance gives an extra shield of stamina, allowing my block to absorb more hits before it drops. And Backstabbery gives me a crap load more damage when I'm attacking enemies from the rear, which is very useful when you're taking on Storm Vermin or trying to kill Roger the Rat Ogre. For my ranged weapons, I have Drakefires, one of the best crowd control weapons in the game, and perfect if you just want to make some toasty rats. Just a quick aside, I had a few annoying frame rate drops near the beginning of the run, so I cut those out of the video. But with all that said, let's get on to the gameplay. I'll let the map intro and first dialogue play out, and then I'll hop back on the mic.
So, this wizard, Drachenfels, he was among the worst of the worst, from what I've heard.
The Grey Wizard's right. This chalice cannot fall into Skaven hands. I mean paws. Filthy, loathsome paws.
These are dark times, and with the Skaven and the Enchanter, they're bound to darken even more.
So this run's going to be a little bit more challenging than usual because it's only me and a relatively low-level player for about 2/3 of the game, and I start out with only bots. Bots are our other teammates, and as you might imagine, it's much preferred to have a good player over the AI. But you can make your bots a lot more useful by equipping them with the right weapons, so shield combos and high stamina weapons that allow them to block and push more is usually what you want them to be aiming for. And if you're host, they'll use whatever weapons you have equipped on your own characters. As I mentioned in my last Vermintide video, there is a huge skill gap between Nightmare and Cata. They really aren't even remotely the same, and it's weird because the jump from Hard to Nightmare is not a very big gap, but there is a huge gap between Nightmare and Cata. I'm gonna quote a post from Manservice here from Reddit, because he does a great job describing the issues people run into when they move up in difficulty. The main problem most people have when they move up in difficulty is due to their misconception that being able to kill a lot of rats fast makes you good. Your kill ability is more or less irrelevant to the outcome of the game if you have decent teammates. What really matters is your ability to not take damage and thus not waste the items available to you or put your team into risky situations. Cataclysm is designed specifically to take advantage of this mindset. Your hits to kill on even the most basic rats will be at least doubled depending on your gear. So if you go all in just trying to kill as many rats as possible, you're leaving yourself open and vulnerable to a lot of damage. And if you're gobbling up health items all over the map, you are a resource sink, possibly preventing your teammates from healing when they truly need to, gobbling up potions and stuff that you really shouldn't be. So considering you die in as few as one hit on Cataclysm, and that's from a Storm Vermin overhead attack, that's just not acceptable. You should always be focused on avoiding damage first and foremost, and this means being prepared to block even clan rats and slave rats if they look like they're going in for an attack. Even if you think you might be able to get a swing off in time, it's often better to block or push instead of attacking just to be safe. As a result of this, spacing is incredibly important. You never want to be in a situation where you have no freedom of movement whatsoever, or the rats are going to be right up in your face, and even with a high stamina shield, when there are a bunch of rats smacking on you, your block isn't going to hold out for very long. Always keep a good few steps of clearance for backing in and out of combat. The biggest, most important piece of advice I can give you is when you're in doubt, block. Blocking and damage avoidance are the single most important things to learn in Vermintide. Even if your DPS sucks, at least you're not hogging resources and taking a bunch of unnecessary damage if you're using block liberally. Remember that blocking is 360 degrees, and so is pushing, so you don't have to be facing the rats that are attacking you to stop their attacks. One thing a lot of newer players don't know, because it's kind of counterintuitive, but you can actually hold block while you are reviving teammates who are knocked down. Block revive is incredibly important, and one of the most important skills you should learn early, and it's really easy. You can literally just hold it down while reviving people, which means even in the middle of a horde, if your stamina isn't broken by all the attacks coming in, you will successfully revive a downed ally. If you are not block reviving, any single hit you take will prevent you from finishing the revive process. It will damage you, and you're probably going to lose your downed friend. That is very bad, because maps and spawns in Vermintide are designed around having 4 players in your party, not 3. So losing an ally can be a very big loss to your team, and often lead to a complete collapse. So there is literally no downside to blocking while reviving. Get used to it, make it a habit. Make it a habit when opening doors, when opening chests, when turning corners. Blocking is your friend. Use it liberally. Okay, so now that I've hammered that into your head, let's move on. You're going to notice throughout this gameplay that I frequently keep my back to a wall or a corner, which is what I'm doing right now. This is very important in Vermintide combat because you're going to get chunked down over time, especially in Cataclysm, where even slave rats do quite a lot of damage to you. Clan rats can do up to 1/3 of your health. It's very important to limit the amount of angles an enemy can come at you from, and the best way to do that is to put your back to a wall and make sure that only the enemies can only come at you from the front. It makes it so much easier to defend yourself if you're in a big open area. But in Drachenfels, this is a little bit of an interesting map because it is very tight. Combat is very close quarters. Everything you see is going to be coming at you from the front or from the rear. There's not a whole lot of flanking your opponents can do. Definitely make sure you use ping liberally as well. If you see health, ping it out. If you see enemy specials, ping it out. Makes it so much easier for people to snipe down enemy specials if they're coming at you. So the elf is a newer player, but what she just did right there was very bad. The initial pounce of an assassin, I believe, does 10 damage, and I took 90 damage in that instance because the elf decided to attack it instead of push it. If you push a gutter runner off a player, it's going to instantly dislodge from them and stop stabbing them with its warpstone daggers. However, if you try attacking it for a while, they have a lot of health on Cataclysm, so what's going to happen is they're going to keep stabbing until it dies. And what that meant was, instead of taking only about 10 or 15 damage from the warpstone daggers, I took almost my entire health pool, which is going to end up being fine because there's going to be health coming up, and I've already healed myself, but it was unnecessary. If you see a gutter runner pounce your teammate, just push it off. It's gonna mitigate the majority of the damage it can possibly do, and especially in the corridors of Drachenfels, you'll be able to see it the next time it comes up, and we'll be able to snipe it down before it hops on us again. And that's another thing that the game doesn't really make clear, is that in Cataclysm, your health pool is actually significantly smaller than it is on easy through nightmare difficulties. You only have 100 health to work with, while on all those other difficulties, you have 150. So not only are your weapons taking longer to kill enemy rats, you also can't take as much damage before going down, and the rats in general hit harder. So it all combines to make for a very difficult game mode, as I'm sure you're starting to understand by now. But the problems newer Cata players can run into can be mitigated somewhat if you watch your back as much as humanly possible. The sooner you understand that there is always something behind you, the better off you're going to be. Your head should always be on a swivel, non-stop throughout each and every run. You'll frequently see me turn around on a dime and dodge backwards, even if there's nothing there. That's habit. That is reflex that's been developed over time, but it's important. Your most threatening enemy isn't a rat ogre, it isn't a poison wind globadier or stern vermin patrol, it's attrition. Attrition from lone, stupid, sneaky little clan rats. Now right here a Packmaster is going to grab Carillion. What you'll notice is I'm not targeting the Packmaster right away. And the reason for that is that Packmasters themselves do almost no damage. Their entire purpose is to separate one of the players on your team from the rest of the team so that clan rats and slave rats can chunk them down and do a lot of damage to them while they're disabled. So when a teammate is grabbed by a Packmaster, don't worry about the Packmaster right away. Worry about the rats that are around your teammate. Kill those first, and then you can focus on killing the Packmaster, because if the rats around aren't hitting him, then he's probably just not taking very much damage. So back to my point about Skaven being alone and sneaky and getting up behind you. So Skaven will do more damage to you when they are alone. If they're ganging up on you, they still hurt, but they do less damage the more of their homies are targeting you at the same time. This is something a lot of people don't know. So for example, on Cataclysm, a single rat who sneaks up behind you and hits you does 37.5 damage. You only have 100 health on Cataclysm. So if this happens 3 times, you're going to be on the ground bleeding out. If there are 3 rats all targeting you and one of them hits you, an unblacked hit will do 30 damage. And this number continues to scale down the more rats are targeting you, down to a minimum of 15 damage if there are 9 or more rats attacking you at once. But if they're doing that little damage, because so many are attacking you at once, you're probably in danger of losing the run anyway, or at least getting knocked down because your team isn't properly crowd controlling them, or killing them fast enough to reset their attack priority. But what this means is, it's not backstab damage when a lone rat comes up behind you and hits you and does a crap load of damage, like way more than you were expecting. What it means is, it was by itself, it was the only rat that was aggroed on you at that one time, and it does more damage because it's the only rat that was aggroed on you. So make sure you watch your back. The lone rats that hit you are going to be doing more damage than pretty much anything else in the game besides a full-on rat ogre punch. But of course, you can see a rat ogre punch coming from a mile away. You can dodge and get out of the way of that a lot easier than some super quiet, super ninja stealthy Skaven assassin that came up behind you and poked you once in the back. I'm not talking about gutter runner assassins. I'm talking about those lone clan rats that will climb out of a wall or a crater in the ground and just sneak up and poke you one time. 37.5 damage on Cataclysm. That is no fun. Make sure you are keeping your head on a swivel. And this room right here that we're in right now is yet another reason that I love Vermintide. Just the attention to lore. If you've ever read anything about Constant Drachenfels, you'll know about the Poison Feast, how he lured a bunch of Empire nobles into his abode and then poisoned all of them. It's just so much attention to detail, so much attention to the lore that makes Warhammer such a fantastic and rich universe to learn about. This is the kind of thing that just makes me love Fat Shark and the game they've created. It's a really nice touch. And it's really just a gorgeous map in general. There's really no other way to say it. It is a beautiful thing to behold. It's definitely one of my favorite runs in Vermintide. If you have not bought the DLC in this game and enjoy the game, I hugely recommend both DLCs. Well, I guess there are 3. There's Schloss. That's really hard to say. There's Asgaraz and there's Drachenfels. I think Drachenfels and Asgaraz are fantastic. I don't really recommend Schloss at this point because the whole Last Stand game mode is a little bit redundant with the changes to the quests and contracts. Free DLC that came out a couple months ago. This part was scary as hell. One thing that has been happening a bit recently is that full storm vermin patrols will spawn basically on top of you. We got lucky there. I cut down the gate and they spawned in the room next to us, one over. If we had been in that room when they spawned, we would have gotten like one shot and just died instantly. It's an annoying bug. It's happened on Smuggler's Run. It's happened on, maybe not. Yeah, actually, no, it has happened to me on Smugglers. It's happened to me on a lot of runs in the game. I think it's a very common on Supply and Demand as well. But another annoying part about the bug is that sometimes Storm Vermin will get caught up And if we aggro that one Storm Vermin who's stuck in the room in the back, it will aggro the entire patrol, which is a nightmare on this difficulty. Storm Vermin, like I said, one overhead attack will down you. So it is very dangerous to go up against Storm Vermin patrols on Cataclysm, because there will usually be between 15 and 20 heavily armored halberd-wielding beasts, and that's just not something you want to fight. So they managed to move off, and now we have to deal with the Rattling Gunner who's close by. Gotta kill that real fast, and a bunch of slaves, but that was a very scary situation. We could have been in a lot of trouble there. Now let's talk about my weapon choices for this run. The Great Axe is one of my favorite weapons, hands down. It used to be kind of bad, but it got some pretty significant buffs in the Karak Azgaraz DLC patch, I believe. That might have been a different patch, but I think it was Karak Azgaraz. But this is a DPS weapon first and foremost. It does a crap load of damage, but it doesn't have the best defensive capabilities. It hits a maximum of 4 targets with its horizontal charge attack and deals 6 damage to the first target and 4 damage to the next 3 rats. So clan rats have 10 health on Kata. You're going to need 3 swings to kill a group of 4 clan rats. But the really cool thing about it is that it one hit kills clan rats with the normal overhead strikes. This is very significant because there are very few melee weapons in the game that can one hit kill clan rats when they have 10 health. The Waywatcher Glaive used to be the best weapon for clearing ambient trash, which is another way of saying the clan rats that are kind of aimlessly milling about on each level, but the Glaive can no longer do that on this difficulty. So the Great Axe, in a way, kind of took over its spot as a pretty versatile and high damage melee weapon that's good for moving through the level at a steady pace. In addition, it also has armor piercing and a very heavy headshot multiplier. So if you're headshotting Storm Vermin or specials with the Great Axe, or if you have backstabbery like I do and you're hitting them in the rear, you're going to be doing so much damage, and it is going to be a fantastic way to quickly cut through hordes of enemies or high value targets that you really need to get off the field very quickly. Plus, there are very few things in the game quite as satisfying as slicing a Skaven literally in half or chopping their heads off with an overhead strike. It is just a very satisfying weapon, and especially with backstabbery, makes a very satisfying sound when you get behind and start decapitating or stabbing enemies in the back with these overhand or sideways strikes.
It's not bug buttons, I'll tell you that. It's a strangler. Don't let it grab you.
So let's talk about the Drakefires. The Drakefires have 2 modes of firing. One are these single bolts of energy that you'll fire. It's a dual weapon, and you just shoot 1 bolt at a time, unless you have Hail of Doom like I do, which will sometimes proc and allow you to fire 2 bolts in 1 shot. But basically what this one does is it does a pretty decent amount of knockback. You can stun lock enemies like Storm Vermin or Gutter Runners like the one I just unlocked there. And it's a very efficient weapon for quickly moving through the level and not generating a ton of heat. On the flip side, there is a secondary fire that is an AoE cone in front of you, and it will burn down and immolate everything in a big cone, and you're about to see it in action, I believe. But it is very satisfying to use. It'll proc a ton of your health regen if you burn the enemy with the cone of fire and then heal or have Bloodlust on your main weapon. You'll heal a lot of Bloodlust procs with the cone of fire, and it just does ridiculous amounts of damage. Right here you'll see it in action. just burns through a huge AoE of slave rats and gets rid of the swarm very quickly. So that's very useful, but it generates a lot of overcharge. Unlike a lot of other ranged weapons in the game, there's no ammunition for the Drakefires. It functions like the Bright Wizard staffs, and that it generates heat, and if you generate too much heat, your weapon will become slower, your melee weapon, for a little bit. And when you see fire on your screen, your melee in general is a lot slower, your blocking is slower, your movement is slower, so you don't want to generate too much heat on it, but you can cool it down with the overcharge, and if it goes all the way up and fills up the entire bar, you will completely overheat and blow yourself up and get automatically down. So it's something you have to manage when you're in a fight. Have to make sure you're not generating so much heat that you either slow yourself down in melee or generate so much that you literally blow yourself up. That's something that you obviously would very much like to avoid if you're using Drakefires or playing as the Bright Wizard. You might have noticed earlier on that I didn't pick up the first Grimoire. Remember that on each of the adventure maps in the game, there are 2 Grimoires usually and 3 tomes. The Grimoires will automatically give you a loot die that will give you a higher roll on your roll at the end of the game if you successfully complete the mission. I didn't pick up the first one because I only had this rank 34, 39 elf on my team, and I was afraid that we were going to be running through the rest of the mission, Cataclysm mission, with only bots, which is obviously not ideal. So as I destroyed that Rattling Gunner, yeah, I didn't want to get the first Grimoire and lower our health. I didn't know how good the elf was going to be. She's actually done quite well for a relatively low rank. I've seen very few level 30 to 40 players do this well in a Cataclysm run, so I was pretty impressed with that. But we are actually going to get our 3rd player pretty soon here, and that will allow us to pick up the last Grimoire. So it's one of those things where a lot of people just love picking up Grimoires on every single run, even if they're not really ready for the difficulty, and that's a very annoying thing. If you want to try Cata out, and you're doing it for the first time with a new group of players, or newer group of players that don't have the experience, don't pick up the Grims. They're going to lower your health, they're going to make the run a lot harder than it needs to be. Just avoid doing that, get some experience under your belt without the Grims, and then once you've started not taking very much damage throughout an entire run, you can graduate to picking up both Grims, all 3 tomes, and go from there. As for the ranking, it's not a true indicator of skill because yes, it is entirely possible to be a rank 20 and be a complete badass at the game, but generally speaking, that's not the case. If you look at experience in the game, it's usually very closely tied to how well you can perform on the higher difficulty. So yes, a rank 400 player might be absolutely atrocious at Cataclysm and take 500 damage a run and get down all the time and be a hog and waste resources and be useless, but generally speaking, a higher ranked player has more time on the game, they're going to have more experience, they're going to be better at the game. That's just how it works. That's how it works in Dota, that's how it works in Vermintide, that's how it works in Total War as well. If you have more time in multiplayer, you're generally going to be better. Now, the Witch Hunter just joined the game. I missed my jump over to get the Grim, which was pretty embarrassing, but thankfully, he was there to pick up the last Grim. And we are getting ready to ascend into the final part of this mission, a very interesting part. And look at this room. It is gorgeous. Got a huge vampire statue drinking out of a goblet. Blood running down his chest in rivulets. It's pretty awesome. And we're going to jump right to the chalices in the back and put them into the statue. And that will allow us to move on to the next part of the mission. So this part's a little bit tricky just in terms of combat, but it is very straightforward. One of your teammates is going to have to carry the statues over to the big statue of Drachenfels or whatever, the vampire. I guess it's not Drachenfels, it's just a big vampire statue. But you want to make sure, obviously, that you're protecting your teammates, making sure that the guy who's carrying the statue isn't getting punched in the face. So I'm going to stay very close to the Witch Hunter if I can, although our teammate's getting a little bit far behind us here. You want to stay together in this part of the mission, and there's actually going to be a very weird bug that's going to pop up pretty soon here. I'll talk about that when it happens. 2 storm vermin on me. and trying to get my backstab rate to proc if I can get around the flank. But basically just going to be doing those overhand strikes on the Storm Vermin if I can. That's where you really do the DPS against Storm Vermin. Get a headshot on them. I think it takes only 2 headshots from the Great Axe to kill a Storm Vermin on Cataclysm. So yeah, right there, he placed 1 statue and it actually plopped in 2. I don't know if he knows how to game the system a bit, or if that was just a bug that happened in that instance. Doesn't happen very often, but in this case, it's going to be good for us. I mean, we don't have to get all 3 of the statues now. We only have to get 2, because 2 of them have already procced. So, dealing with a lot of clan rats now, and you can see they just start pouring out of the breaches from everywhere. And as usual, in the last stages of Castle Drachenfels, things are going to get a little bit tense. Right there, I just went over the threshold for my Drakefires. I definitely used my Drakefires too much there. You'll see in melee that swing was super slow. That can be very dangerous in a situation like this, where your melee is very slow, your block is slow, your movement is slow. When you're in the final stage of Drachenfels before you go down into the dungeons itself, things can get very scary. I definitely used my Drakefires there too much. That was a mistake, and it might cost us a Grim here, but we are gonna successfully get up Saltspire, the Witch Hunter, and make a break for the bottom of the map here. So we're going to jump down into the portal and move on to the true final stage, the last run to the cart at the end.
Don't waste it.
Made a kind of big mistake there. So there are a couple ways to deal with Packmasters in the situation that I was in. I could have either used my secondary fire from my Drakefires, which would have stun locked the Packmaster and prevented him from lunging at me, or you can just straight up dodge the Packmaster's hook. The same can be done against Gutter Runner pounces. You can literally just stand still, wait for them to make their move, and if you dodge at the right time, you will literally dodge the hook or dodge the pounce from the Gutter Runner, which can be a game-winning kind of maneuver. So I messed up there. I took a hit that I shouldn't have. We have health in the bottom. We're going to be fine to move on to the final make or break run at the end, but yeah, that was unnecessary. All I had to do was just use my Drakefires, use the secondary fire instead of the single fire, and I would have just completely stun-locked the Packmaster and not taken a hit from that clan rat for no reason. But after the long marathon, it is time for the sprint to the finish. This part is very tricky for newer players. It can even trick up some of the more experienced players as well. But you got to stay together with your team. Got to watch your 6, got to watch your 12. Make sure that you're looking at every single angle they can come from. They'll be coming from everywhere. And basically just work together. Have someone pushing rats at the front. Have someone doing the DPS in the back like I am with the Great Axe right now. And just keep moving. Now, if you're getting stun locked by hordes of rats, obviously keep it together. Make sure you kill everything before you move on. And it is always a nice way to deal with the hordes that come out of this room. Get into this gate and just start stun-locking them with the Drakefires, which I'm going to try to do here. As they pour in through the doorway, just get my Drakefires out and use that cone. Don't want to overheat again, because I want my melee to, of course, be at its top speed right now. But, yeah, in these corridors, the Drakefires are just an incredible weapon, because they can only come from one angle right now, which is right in front of me. Obviously, my teammates are watching my back, where we're headed. But yeah, the Drakefires are super good here. You can see them just burning through everything that's coming through. And just some nice Great Axe work will cut the heads off these slaves as they come forward, pushing a clan rat who was about to punch my teammate. And we are almost there. We are almost at the end of the run. And now things get really scary. Storm Vermin and Gutter Runner coming in, and we have a player down. And this is how things can quickly snowball out of control in Vermintide. A Grim player just got jumped by the Gutter Runner. He's down, got to block revive him and get him up. A lot of clan routes coming in. Carillion gets down in the background by the Storm Vermin. We've got a horde coming in that I'm going to have to control with the Drakefires. And basically going to have to overcharge, throw a bomb to make sure we don't get completely overrun here. Things are getting very scary. We are in sight of the cart to finally finish this run. And a Rattling Gunner spawns as well. My lord. And now we have 3 players on white health with no heals. Heal share, by the way, is the best equipable trinket in the game because situations like this, if I had a med kit or health potion, I could literally get everyone out of white health, but I don't, unfortunately. And that means they won't get down if they lose their health bar. They will straight up die. So it's going to be a mad scramble to get to the end of this ravine. We're going to lose the Witch Hunter. We're going to lose Carillion, the Way Watcher, and we're going to lose Kruber, and I am inside the cart, and I just have to press the button, and I am going to go down as I close the door, and that was 100% my fault at the end. I panicked. All I had to do was hold block. Yes, hold block while I closed the door there, and I would have been fine. I had plenty of stamina left, but I dropped my guard by accident. And that is going to cause us, at the very end of the run, to lose it. Now, I've completed Castle Drachenfels on Cataclysm like 25 times or something. So, it wasn't the biggest deal that I didn't complete it in this run. But that is a perfect representation of why you should always be blocking. I hope this helped you guys out in Cataclysm. I hope you guys enjoyed the run. I'll see you next time. Indypride signing out for now.